I don't know if any of you recognize it or not, but I am from these parts, from Texas. In fact, my sister has a stronger accent than I do. I grew up here in Central Texas and then spent some time up in the Northeast. In fact, when I worked in New York City and Manhattan, I would have people say, "You're not from around here, are you?" And they would try to figure out where I was from. Now, the interesting thing about New York City is 40% of the people who live there are foreign-born. So I was out of place, though, at times. But I was very fortunate to come back to Texas to study and to be closer to family. And after being here for a few years, I have put in an application at Tarleton State University as I was finishing my degree at Baylor, again, another Baylor. I came to here, I think, within a few years after your tenure began. And having been in a very metropolitan place like first Boston and then Manhattan and many other places, coming back to Central Texas, one of the things that I thought that I would miss was the diversity of being in a place, a very multicultural place, meeting people from all over the world, hearing their stories, learning about their lives, and seeing how we were all coming together in this place where we could work side by side and appreciate what each other had to bring and contribute to what we were doing. But what I found here at Tarleton is while it's not quite as diverse as New York City, and not very many places are, it is a place that has brought together people from around the world and continues to do so. This semester I'm teaching a class in the politics and government of East and South Asia, having spent some time in India myself, and I have invited faculty that we have here at Tarleton, a growing number of faculty who are from China, from Japan, from Korea, from India, from Nepal, and they have graciously come to speak and talk and engage with students about their countries of origin, about the challenges, the issues, and really exposing our students to things that they would not find or hear in other opportunities. And so I have experienced and continue to experience a tremendous amount of diversity in a university here at Tarleton that is growing very rapidly, but also growing not just in numbers. We're growing in the way that we take that diversity and we make it very powerful for our students, for their lives, and for what they're going to go out and accomplish. And as a person who has kind of been in the background as an instructor, teaching about 300 students a semester for about 5 years, it's better now. So I'm not. I have watched that a good. President Ottavio, and I would like to welcome him and ask him to come to welcome you on behalf of the university and to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all so very much for coming to commemorate this 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. Clearly a piece of legislation that changed the world. Before I make comments, I would like to stop and say this. I expect I speak for all of you when I say that I was truly moved by our students' performances, the musical performances tonight. They were just spectacular, and inspired by our speakers and our poet this evening. Thank you all so very much for what you did and for how it is that you make us so very proud of Tarleton. Would you thank them on my behalf of them? And I also want to say that a very special thank you to Dr. Morrow, because this is his vision to have this day. And I will tell you, I have seen a lot of things organized in my time as presidents and as a leader of a variety of different places, and he has done an absolutely remarkable job. And I know, based on conversation with him, that while he has been the inspiration and the source of a lot of energy behind this, he also is very quick to give credit to other folks. But I want to say thank you for what you have done. It has been a marvelous day, and truly one that I think all of us have learned from and have been inspired by. So let's thank Dr. Morrow. And the people that have made this possible, the students that we heard this evening, the faculty, they've helped us celebrate clearly a landmark event in our nation's history. They've encouraged us to contemplate the people and the events, the sacrifices, and the struggles that enabled the passage of that landmark piece of legislation. I think it's important to understand this evening that the goal of this anniversary celebration is not simply to offer congratulations and then to blow out the candles like you might at a birthday party or something. In fact, I think it's intended to be quite the opposite. Today has been about lighting a fire rather than blowing out a fire in the minds and hearts, compelling our engagement in the continuing struggle for equal treatment and fairness for all. So remember that as you take away from this day's event, that it is not just a one-day event, but it is truly intended to light your fires and to light your minds about how it is that you go forward and do greater things for this world. I think Tarleton's mission statement is important to us this evening, and I want to quote from it. It says, "To develop moral and ethical thinkers who demonstrate civility and integrity while contributing meaningfully and responsibly to global society." That's an aspirational statement. And I think that the words of that aspirational statement reflect the career and the enormous contributions of our keynote speaker, the Honorable Shirley Franklin. She is currently the Barbara Jordan Visiting Professor of Ethics and Political Values at the University of Texas, LBJ School of Public Affairs. Shirley Franklin has had a distinguished career in public service, and all of her many accomplishments, well, not all of them by any means, but many of them are chronicled in your program that you have before you. I'm not going to repeat all of those, but I do want to highlight a few things. We had a wonderful opportunity to hear some of her, I guess, more memorable moments as the mayor of Atlanta. When she began, she faced a severe budget deficit, failing infrastructure, low employee morale, and the lack of public confidence in a city government. And although she says she was an accidental politician, it's very clear to, I think, everybody that has met her that she is an intentional and very, very effective leader. Her success in turning around the city earned her what is one of the most prestigious awards you can receive, the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. And she continues to bring her passion, her skills, and voice to a variety of issues, from human trafficking to water quality, from access to education to digital equality. A word I think that most people would often use to describe Shirley Franklin is one. Simple word, one. One as in the first female mayor of Atlanta, the first African-American mayor of a major southern city. One as in unique, having uncommon ability to bring people together around shared goals and mutual interest. One as in number one, the very best, named by U.S. News and World Report as one of America's best leaders. And one as in the one you turn to when challenges are tough, change is needed, and moral leadership is required. And I will tell you this, after having spent a dinner with her, she is the one speaker you want to be your keynote this evening to celebrate the 50th anniversary on civil rights. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Tarleton welcome to the Honorable Shirley Franklin.
That was very generous. The one thing we didn't think about is how short I am. As a politician, I've learned to adjust. So I think, can you still hear in the back? I won't mess up your video, will I? If I stand slightly to the side. I mean, you cannot possibly be a politician and not see your audience. It doesn't work very well. President Ottavio, you've been most generous in your introduction, and and you're welcoming me to this wonderful university. Dean Styron and Professor Morrow, you have been absolutely wonderful in shepherding me through the various activities today. I have been thrilled to be here. I am absolutely thrilled that you invited me, and humbled by the opportunity to say a few words about the Civil Rights Act and how it might have influenced my life and your life and the world that we know today. So they've decided to rethink how we do this, right? Thank you, thank you. No one ever says in my bio that I'm 5'1". The students have been fabulous today, all of them who've performed and everyone who's worked on the program. So let's give everybody another big round of applause. The music was fabulous, the poems were wonderful, the exhibits today all over campus were wonderful. It was good. I walked up to a group of students and the young women said, "Now where are you on women's rights?" I said, "I'm there." Okay. I recounted to them some of my early years as a teenager, a long, long time ago, and my continued commitment to the rights of women, but also to the rights of other people. Now, when I was growing up in the 1940s and 50s, and certainly by the 60s and the 70s, I actually thought that by today, 2014, we'd be cruising along. And we wouldn't have to worry about the debate of who is in and who is out, and who had opportunity and who didn't have opportunity. I was naive enough to think that the struggles would be over. But as I have aged and as I've learned and as I've listened and as I've observed, the truth of the matter is every generation has challenges to face. The generations of the 1940s and the integration of the armed services, those were hard things, and President Truman was a leader who actually encouraged and forced the integration of the armed services. Those of us who study civil rights actually believe that President Truman and the integration of the military was a part of the foundation of the civil rights that we celebrate some 50 years later. I have met men, in those days not women, men who were in the Army when Truman said, "We will integrate." I'll never forget, as a major businessman, and I was out selling the city in Las Vegas, of all places, the city of Atlanta, and for some reason he wanted to chat. And we started chatting. It turned out that he was a Southerner, and he was told by his battalion chief that he was in charge of being sure that the integration in his battalion was successful. And the commander said, "You know more about this than everyone else because you've lived in the heat of the times of segregation. So you know what it's like to be separate, and I want you to help us to define how we can work together." Now, of course, many servicemen came back and thought all problems would be over. The truth of the matter is, they were not over. Indeed, there was still segregation and still disenfranchisement and still people who could not borrow from a bank, people who had served our country who could not get loans. And the result of that was a simmering concern that ultimately, now that we celebrate the 50th anniversary, and not much talk today about how that came to be. Well, I was living in Philadelphia for this election. I was a teenager, and John F. Kennedy was running for president. And I was attracted to him for a number of reasons. One reason, he was young. You see, the presidents all looked kind of old to me when I was 15, and I'm like, this guy is young. He's closer to my age. I knew nothing about politics. And then he chose this senator from the South, Johnson from Texas, and I thought, okay with me. Of course, the adults in my life were like, well, we don't know about that. Because the Southerners had actually been holding up some civil rights legislation, or at least that was the story that was told. So ultimately, we know the story of Kennedy. He had a very short presidency. He espoused a time of investment in education, an opportunity to talk about civil rights. But it was really Johnson and Johnson's ability to network. We would call it networking. Those people who were the object of his lobbying would call it a little more than networking, but his ability to use his experience, his years of experience in the Congress and in the Senate in order to persuade his colleagues that it was time for America to change. A Southerner. Most unpredictable. Nobody anticipated. People thought it was impossible. In some ways, people have never forgiven him for that. Some people. But the rest of us, all of us, have benefited from the contributions of people of all backgrounds, races, ethnicity, and as a woman, those of us of the other gender. The doors of America's opportunity opened. And they just didn't open because of Johnson. They also opened because of King, Martin Luther King. But they opened for hundreds and hundreds of other people who put their lives on the line, put their personal interests secondary, and who indeed stepped forward really for a better life, often one that they didn't experience themselves. The ultimate sacrifice. The sacrifice for someone else's freedom, whether you get it or not. So we live in the shade of a tree that we did not plant. The tree was planted by those who've come before us. The opportunity for you to actually sit side by side in Texas, in Central Texas, in Stephenville, at Tarleton, is an opportunity that was given and graced, I believe graced by God, but also given to you by people who would never know your name. So it is important whether your parents and your family and your friends contribute to your college education and your well-being. It is certainly important what your professors in this university contribute to your growth and development and your education. But today we celebrate something slightly different. We celebrate the sacrifices, the vision, the foresight, the courage of people who never knew you. It is the kind of sacrifice that if we could name a person, we might grant them sainthood, or a Nobel Peace Prize, or some other big award. But you see, there were literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people whose names have never been told, who are unknown, whose faces are unknown, who paved the way for us. Literally hundreds and hundreds. Ordinary people. The shopkeeper. The bus driver, the police officer, the neighbor down the street, the people who took off work and over a period of time, sometimes after work, did the hard work that made America change so that we could sit side by side. It was illegal for us to be in the same place. So now what does that mean today? It's really clear to me. You see, I've told this story, and some of of you heard it already, I tell it all the time, that when I was born in 1945, I could not be mayor of Atlanta. When I graduated from high school in 1963, I could not be mayor of Atlanta. I still couldn't be mayor of Atlanta in 1968, not really, even though the law had changed. So the law had changed, but women still were not expected to be in leadership, in public leadership roles. Yet in 2001, I was elected mayor of Atlanta. The mistake I could make is to think that I actually did that. I did my part, but it was a little part. It wasn't a big part. My part was showing up. My part was studying hard, and those of you who heard my story know my part was fixing sewers. But the biggest part of that story is the part of all of these unnamed people. Men and women who would never know my name, who had the audacity to believe that people like you and I would come along and that we would take the baton and go with it and run with it. That they could pass the baton to us. I am humbled by that opportunity. I don't take it for granted. I had the least role in my own success. My opportunity was created by other people because they believed in the strength of human potential, and they believed that there would come a time that people long after that would step into the space of leadership. So folks ask me all the time, did you always want to be mayor? The answer to that is absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I resisted it. My former bosses, Andrew Young and Mayor Jackson, and a handful of other people came forward and told me that I should be the next candidate for mayor. And I said, you got the wrong person. Couldn't be me. I knew I was losing the battle when I was coming through a parking garage and checking out in downtown Atlanta, and the clerk said to me, aren't you going to be the next mayor? This is 4 years before the election. I'm thinking, I'm losing this conversation. I'm losing this battle. Ultimately, I decided to run. And one of the reasons was that I had been to programs like this in high schools and colleges and churches and community centers. And I had said to young women, you can be anything you want to be in America. I had said that. I had given a speech, I had smiled, I had given them a certificate, I had encouraged them from, being at the top of their class or having perfect attendance or performing well. But I had to look in the mirror and say, if that is true, that they can be anything, why are you afraid to be anything? Why are you afraid to step up and take the risk? Why are you at 55 telling them they can be anything and you're scared to death? So I had to face my own fears. And even when I was mayor, and times would get hard. And believe me, very few audiences were as polite as you. People yelled at me, they complained to me, all of that. And that's part of the political process. I'm not complaining about it. It was a pain in the neck from time to time. But the truth of the matter was, I didn't have the confidence. So where did I find that confidence? I found it in our history. I found it in the history of the Civil Rights Movement. I found it in the history of Egypt. I found it in the history of Europe. I found it in my education. I found it in some of the poems that were read. I found it in the music. I found it in the history. So one of the reasons this week and this day is so important, because you have to find those touchstones for yourself. So you can do what seems impossible. I know all of you are high-performing, high-aspirational students. The truth of the matter is you will exceed even your own aspirations if you are open to the possibility. And if you thrive on the history and foundation that has been laid for you. I hardly know any names. I know a few of the students that I've met today. But what I do know is the world is open to you in a way that it has never been open before to young people. And I know that you have the capacity not just to walk through that door yourself, but you have the capacity to keep the door open for other people. So when I ran as the mayor of Atlanta, and I was elected, I determined that part of the civil rights tradition that I can continue was to be sure that people who came behind me could walk through that same door. That people would say a woman could do it. People would say a short woman could do it. People would say a Yankee could do it. People would say that an African American could do this job. People could say a non-traditional politician could do this work. So your job is to be sure that the door is open. That's what the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Immigration Reform Act, the Fair Housing Act, go down the list of the civil rights legislation. That's what those acts mean, that the door is open. And the responsibility of those of you who are going to graduate in 2015, anybody here? I know there's one, you already told me. How about 16, 17, 18, or however long it takes? Your job is to be sure that the door is open. That's what Dr. King meant when he said he's seen the promised land. Now we quote the speech that he gave at the March on Washington. I was 18 years old. I happened to be there with my mother and family. I actually heard him deliver that speech. I heard John Lewis speak. I heard Roger Wilkins speak. I was there. And it was a wonderful, inspirational day. But as I have studied Dr. King, my favorite speech is his last speech, where he says, I have been to the mountaintop. You know it. He's in Memphis a few days before his assassination. Do you know the story? He was not planning to go. He was not feeling well. Ralph Abernathy, Reverend Abernathy, was to speak, but the church was full. And he went and called Martin. This is the story, and I call him Martin in the name of Reverend Abernathy. He called Martin and said, you have to come. The people want to hear from you. And Dr. King gets there, and he tells his story. And he says, I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. So that's pretty inspirational. He's seen it, so I can see it, right? But that's not what inspires me. He says, I may not get there with you. But we as a people, and by this time, Dr. King's definition of people was worldwide and global. It included everyone. We will get there. You will get there without me. What humility. Nobel Peace Prize winner. Young man, commanded international respect. He basically said, take me out of the equation. Is that not humility? 30-something years old, celebrated around the world, forced the integration of Montgomery, buses in his 20s, recognized by the world as one of the great orators and speakers, has given this phenomenal speech at the March on Washington, but still says, I won't be here. And if I'm not, I have the audacity, I have the commitment, I have the understanding, I have the humility to know that other people can lead. Audacious. Audacious. He basically says, it's on you. And you, and you, and you and me. That we are capable of creating a world that is fair, that is committed to freedom, that is accessible to everyone, that is not blind to the troubles of the world or the troubles of people. He is saying we, not him, are capable of making that a reality. And he doesn't put a time limit on it. So for those of you who are under 30, who thought you were just going to cruise on through, the doors would be open, the laws would be there. That's not what that says. It says that we pass the baton from generation to generation until we achieve this level of fairness, until we actually live worldwide now. He was not just talking about Texas and Georgia. That we live in peace and friendship and love. And that is the challenge of the civil rights movement for me. So it is not enough to have won an award, and the president knows and others that the only reason I won an award on anything is because I fixed the city sewers. That's what they thought was pretty spectacular. It was pretty hard. I'm not saying it wasn't hard. But I fixed the city's sewers and water system, and I figured out how to pay for it. That was the main thing. The bigger problem, the engineers knew how to fix it. They just didn't have anyone who would stand up and say it's going to cost money. And I showed up and did that. But I hope my contribution is really to help people understand this audacious challenge of Dr. King, the vision of Lyndon B. Johnson, and President Truman, and all the others who come before, that we can achieve equality and dignity, and that we will not be blind to the troubles or silent in the face of the troubles of others. That's the only thing that matters about the Civil Rights Act today, in my opinion. The only thing that matters is that we will speak up, stand up, and act up for what's right, not just for ourselves, but for generations unborn. I've never been to Tarleton. I hadn't been to Stephenville. I didn't know where it was. In today's world of Google Maps, I can find out pretty quickly. I'm not that good on Google, so I didn't worry about it. I just waited for Dr. Morrow to tell me where I was going. I was trusting, expecting. I don't know what I thought I would find. But what I found is an example of what's the best in America. What I found is what is best about America. That in a place that didn't do this not too long ago, did not celebrate civil rights, did not particularly want to even understand it, that today's students and faculty and staff and friends are prepared to recommit themselves to a better world. And as a former mayor, and a former elected official, and also a former appointed official, which might be more important, I'm going to tell the story every place I go. I'm going to talk about this place in Central Texas that had the audacity to gather a few people to think about what it means to care about other folks who are unknown, unnamed, and unborn. And that you, some of you, doesn't take everybody, that some of you will commit yourself to that kind of fairness, that kind of equality, that kind of justice in a big way, and also in very small ways, acts of kindness. I am privileged to be among you. I am inspired by your work, and I am hopeful for the future that you will help to create. Thank you very much.
Privilege to have you here, to spend some time with you. It was kind of selfish reasons that I offered to come to Austin to pick you up and bring you here, and I've enjoyed every minute of it to be able to. But we are very grateful to have you here. You mentioned those that came before, and I had, in closing, I had picked a selection from a call to a March on Washington. Not 1963, but 1941. A call to march on Washington for many of the same reasons that the march would happen in 1963. And in that text, the enlightened attitudes and perspectives of what this country should be. And I think that's how much I've learned in my life about from the leaders of civil rights from ages past is what this country, that many of them knew a lot more about what America should be. And in that text is something that very much inspired me, and I think that affirms what your call to our commitment to civil rights. We believe in national unity, which recognizes equal opportunity of black and white citizens to jobs in national defense and the armed forces, and in all other institutions and endeavors in America. We condemn all dictatorships. We are loyal, patriotic Americans all. But if American democracy will not defend its defenders, if American democracy will not protect its protectors, if American democracy will not give jobs to its toilers because of race or color, if American democracy will not ensure equality of opportunity, freedom and justice to its citizens, black and white, it is a hollow mockery and belies the principles for which it is supposed to stand. Hopefully that, based on what we've been given, our inheritance here today, that we know those principles, we've seen their realization in many ways, and we will continue to work and see them for years to come. Thank you for coming and inspiring us and being a part of our celebration. Thank all of you for being here tonight, and we hope that we all have now a calling, a commitment, a renewed commitment to what civil rights means in this country and what we can do not only here but around the world. Thank you so much.